The United States tried to control the global race for artificial intelligence by cutting off the supply of advanced hardware to its biggest rival. Instead, that exact policy engineered the outcome it was designed to prevent. To understand how this happened, we have to look at the starting line. This chart shows cumulative private sector investment in AI between 2013 and 2023. You can see a massive disparity here. The U.S. poured over $335 billion into the sector, dwarfing China's $103 billion. America held absolute supremacy. That supremacy relies on something called the AI stack. The AI stack is the set of necessary building blocks to run AI applications, ranging from user interfaces down to raw data. But the absolute bottleneck is the bottom tier, the physical infrastructure layer consisting of servers, networking, and highly advanced microchips. Washington realized a simple physical reality.
Software can be copied and data can be scraped, but whoever monopolizes the physical computing hardware ultimately dictates the global future of artificial intelligence. So back in October 2022, the U.S. government implemented strict export controls. They specifically banned the sale of advanced NVIDIA A100 and H100 GPUs to Chinese companies. GPUs, or graphics processing units, are specialized electronic circuits that accelerate the massive mathematical calculations required to train AI. The strategic intent was straightforward. By starving Chinese tech firms of the world's best computing power, the U.S. aimed to freeze their development timelines and secure a long-term American technological monopoly. But the data reveals a shocking reality. This graph tracks the performance scores of top United States models versus their Chinese counterparts. Instead of falling behind, China's top AI models rapidly closed the quality gap. In January 2024, the United States maintained a 9.3% performance lead. In just over a year, that deficit was nearly erased, shrinking to a tiny 1.7% gap. By attempting to crush the Chinese AI industry with a hardware blockade, the United States accidentally forced Beijing into a sprint that supercharged their development timeline. Beijing absorbed the initial shock by launching a whole-of-nation industrial policy. The government injected a $47.5 billion state investment fund directly into their domestic semiconductor market to brute force a solution. While domestic factories spun up, Chinese tech firms survived on illicit workarounds. Third-party intermediaries and sophisticated smuggling networks kept a steady trickle of restricted American chips flowing across the border. Then came the domestic breakthroughs that caught U.S. officials off guard. A Chinese company called SMIC managed to domestically produce 7-nanometer chips. A 7-nanometer chip is a highly advanced microscopic processor that packs billions of transistors into a tiny space for massive computational power. The physical proof arrived in 2023 with the release of the Huawei Mate 60 Pro. The smartphone was powered by these domestically manufactured chips, proving that China was achieving hardware self-sufficiency years ahead of Western forecasts. State-backed capital and black market hardware kept the industry from collapsing. But hardware was only half the equation. China's true competitive advantage was born purely out of software desperation.
Because Chinese developers were starved of elite hardware, they couldn't rely on raw computing power. They had to rely on software optimization. Software optimization is the process of restructuring code so it uses less memory and computing power to achieve the exact same result. The AI company DeepSeek is the prime example of this. They released highly capable models designed to run without NVIDIA's cutting-edge processors. Necessity drove algorithmic innovations that the abundance of brute force computing power had masked in the West. But running optimized code at a massive global scale still requires an enormous amount of physical electricity. To solve this, Beijing launched the Eastern Data Western Compute initiative. The state is systematically moving massive data processing centers away from the crowded eastern coast and relocating them to the far western provinces, where real estate is cheap and energy is highly abundant. This side-by-side comparison reveals the resulting economic disruption. Chinese developers are now selling AI tokens for pennies on the dollar. A token is a basic unit of text, code, or data processed by a large language model. While Western models charge around $15 per million output tokens, Chinese companies are charging between $2 and $3. By combining hyper-efficient software with state-subsidized energy, China created an unbeatable economic advantage. It is a direct threat to the high-cost business models driving Silicon Valley. The U.S. export controls did not stop the global AI race. They split the track, resulting in two completely divergent technological ecosystems dividing the globe. The American ecosystem is a bet on absolute capability. It relies on highly advanced, heavily funded, closed-source models driven by the private sector. The Chinese ecosystem is a bet on global diffusion. It relies on cheap, open-source models that are just good enough for mass export. Looking at this map of data center counts across the Middle East, you can see how swing states are reacting. Sovereign wealth funds, which are massive state-owned investment funds used to invest a country's reserves globally, are using their own energy abundance to build neutral AI infrastructure hubs in places like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Israel. The digital infrastructure of the 21st century is actively being divided by geopolitical borders. Allied nations and developing markets are being forced to navigate a fractured world order. Across the Atlantic, Europe is reacting to this superpower split with a panicked push for tech sovereignty. They are deploying heavy regulations and funding their own infrastructure, terrified of becoming entirely dependent on foreign systems. Through heavy investment, the United States successfully maintained the absolute frontier of raw technological capability. But capability alone does not guarantee market dominance. In a globalized economy, the ultimate winner might not be the country that builds the smartest, most expensive AI. It might be the country that builds a system cheap enough for the developing world to actually use. The United States tried to build a wall around the future of computing. Instead, they forced their biggest rival to pave a completely new road.